now. Hi and welcome to Conversations in Birth Confidence. I'm Charlotte Canyu from Birth Essence, supporting women to feel confident. And today I'm welcoming Simone Surgeoner from Melbourne in Australia, who's a mother of 4 and also a fellow journey practitioner. So welcome, Simone. It's really great to have you today.
Thank you for having me.
No, I should probably explain just for anyone listening that a journey practitioner is a method of healing that is an emotionally based forgiveness process that takes you on a guided journey, looks at blocked cellular memories inside your body so that you can heal from those. So that's how I know you from the same training, but you're also an experienced mother and lots of really interesting experiences to talk about today. So would you tell us a little bit about your backstory and how you found the confidence to birth the way you have done for your children?
Well, I've got 4 daughters, 21, 19, 9 and 7. The first 2 were from my first marriage, and then the second 2 from my next relationship, and he's since passed away, the little girl's father. Sorry, I'll do it here. I think it's really important, these stories we grow up with, not just culturally, but especially in our family. And I was very fortunate that I had a mother who, unfortunately for her, she had 2 really bad birth experiences. I'm the eldest of 4. And so she had 2 really bad hospital experiences. So after the first 2, myself and my brother, she decided to take things into her own hands, and she had a home birth with her 3rd child, and then a birth centre with her 4th. So I sort of grew up, with my mum, very interested in health and talking about her own experiences, why it didn't work for her in the hospital system, especially back then in the early 70s, and just how much better it was for her. And I have vague recollections of being present, like my mum being in labour with my younger sister, and she gave birth at home. So I guess I just grew up with this idea that, birth could be different and a woman could take charge of her own birth. And then when I got pregnant with my eldest 22 years ago, all my friends or all the people I knew were giving birth in hospital, some without drugs, so they were sort of having experiences where they were positive. And I just remember being pregnant with her at work, and just all of a sudden this water birth just like popped into my head, and I don't know where I heard that. I don't know where I'd seen that. I didn't know anyone had done it. I didn't even know what it meant. And this is in the early days of the internet.
Yeah,
so
22 years ago.
And there wasn't a lot of information on water birth. And then, I found in Melbourne 2 birth centres that did it, and so I went on to have my first 2 daughters at a birth centre and had water births, and they were amazing experiences, and I love my midwife. She was excellent. So I really started to appreciate that birth could be something special and sacred, even though I didn't have those words back then. And as I said to everybody, I was like, I don't know how you give birth on dry land. For me, water birth was it. And I know for other women, they've tried to have water birth and they've had their heart set on water birth, and then they've got into the bath and gone, oh God, that feels awful. So you don't really know until you try. But for me, it was instinctual. I had to be in water. And then I always wanted a home birth. But my first husband was very against it. And so then when I got together with Nick, my last, the younger girl's father, he was supportive, and I just wanted a doula. I didn't want a midwife. And so, and he'd never had children. Those were his first. And then our doula got sick, like really, 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 really sick, 2 weeks out of giving birth. And so when we got the phone call and she said, you're going to have to find somebody else, I don't think I'll be able to attend the birth. I just got off the phone and I turned to Nick and I went, okay, I just want to do it on our own. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, really? I was like, yep. So we had a free birth at home, and I'd always had the desire to give birth in nature actually when I was still with my first husband. So even before I got together with Nick. And that was after watching the video Birth into Being and seeing the women in the Russian Sea giving birth.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, it didn't seem possible, or it wasn't something I could do with my third. But then when I got pregnant with my fourth, I knew this was my last chance. And I was like, but I'd actually forgotten about it. I'd actually completely forgotten about it after years of thinking about it and talking about it. And then like about my 6th month, in my end of my second trimester, I suddenly went, birth in nature, I want to give birth in nature. It was like I literally had forgotten about it. And then it was just like, okay, bang. And we just, decided to go and organise it and do it. So, and because I'd had 2 beautiful birth centre experiences and then a free birth at home, I felt very confident in my ability then to go and do something quite radical by other people's standards.
Yeah, even a birth centre can seem radical to some, and I think it's really interesting to hear. Like, I didn't know that about the story of your mum, and it kind of answered one of the questions I have, where many people doing something different have got something that gave them that impetus. So for me, it was knowing about how I was born, which is I didn't know about it growing up. It was from the journey uncovering cellular memories, and I was like, not doing that again, not doing it like that for my children. And so you had a story that gave you that, and you were like, yeah, this is what it can be.
Yeah. Oh, the journey definitely helped me as well. So I did my journey practitioner training in 2005, 2006, and that was after I'd had my first 2. And I found that spontaneously, and I didn't realise this didn't happen to other people. I mean, by now I've processed, hundreds and hundreds, if not 1,000 people. But when I was having processes done on myself, I kept on going back to the womb or back to birth, and it would spontaneously just go there often. I knew I was a forceps delivery. I knew my mother had had trouble with the birth. But I just kept on revisiting those experiences, or being in the womb and feeling my mother's emotions and taking those on. And then after a while, because after I'd been doing it for a few years, I was like, no one else I process tends to go back to the womb, or not certainly as often as I do. So I think it was something always in me that something in me needed to be healed around birth, around being conception in the womb. So those were really just important things for me personally. And we're all different. My sister doesn't want children, hasn't had any children. And I don't think she's ever felt the need to go back and revisit, although she was a home birth. But, I think we just all come in with different things that we need to heal and work on. So, but going back to the womb and going back to the birth trauma and healing that was certainly a big impetus then in changing the way I gave birth, because I didn't like the way I was born. And to anyone who, it sounds funny because, a lot of people go, well, we don't remember our birth, but your body does. Your body on a cellular level definitely remembers your experience of birth. And so I wanted my children to have, imprinted in their cells really positive experiences of their birth.
Yeah. So I know how it happened for me. Was it like a spontaneous, you were guided to go to a memory for something that was stuck now, and then you were like, oh, I'm in the womb? How did you know that was where you were, and what was it like when you remember?
I mean, I've had so many processes, really. I do remember one. I went into the womb, and the reason I remember it was because I was a trainer at a journey event, and one of the delegates who was his first time, and he didn't have anyone to partner up with. So I, as a trainer, said, I'll partner up with you because you do a process swap. And he was very nervous. And I remember that, you're sort of nervous when you have to work with a trainer because you think that you're going to get it wrong and all that kind of stuff. and there's something that I hadn't experienced up until then, that when you work with someone who's completely brand new and has no expectations and isn't trying to get you anywhere, and because he didn't know what to do, I just surrendered really, really deeply in a way to facilitate his processing me. So I was just like, and he was going off script, and he was staying on the script, sorry. And I just spontaneously went into the womb. And I remember the experience was that every negative emotion that my mum was having, and it must have been something like big, but, later referencing with stories, that I'd heard, but every thing that was hurting her felt like it was like daggers hurting my body as the baby in the womb. It was like I could feel every single emotion of hers really, really strongly. And we all know, we've all had that, like that visceral experience of having really hurtful things said to us, and it literally feels like it's hurting us and hurting our body. But that was my first experience of when you're in the womb, and as a mother, if something's hurting you emotionally, then it's, you know, the baby's having the exact same experience. So, and not that you can avoid that. I mean, that's part of our life experience, and you can't shield your baby from, you know, every negative thing. But it certainly just started to really awaken this idea in me that babies aren't just coming in sort of like free floating and they don't feel anything and they don't cognitively understand stuff. Like, they're experiencing it all, and they're coming in, and that's shaping their imprint for this life. That's, you know, already creating this sort of matrix within their being of, oh, this is how life is. You know, hard, painful, hurtful. People are kind, people are unkind. You know, you're taking all that on in the womb, and so from that point on, I really started to focus a lot on, you know, how, yeah, birth imprints our experience for the rest of our life.
Did that shape how you prepared in pregnancy for your third and fourth children once you'd had those experiences? Did you think
Yeah.
differently? Or you were already on a great path, but did you?
Yes, which is easier said than done. I think that, you know, especially as modern women, I mean, I love the idea of, you know, living in the country and for the whole pregnancy just being out and picking wildflowers and, you know, having no stress, and, you know, and I mean, I love that idea. I hated the fact that I had to work through any of my pregnancies. The only pregnancy I didn't work through was my last one. So yes, I was mindful of trying to keep the stresses down, but, you know, that's still not always easy or possible for us. So, but it takes conscious effort to really, and anyone I think who's been pregnant as a woman, you know that your brain changes, that whole pregnancy brain thing, but your brain changes, you become more sensitive. For me, my experience of being pregnant is like having PMS for, you know, 9 months. So I just feel heightened sensitivity to everything, not just smells and taste, but, you know, people's emotions and everything. So I would do my best to make sure that I was caring not just for my body, but, you know, for my emotions and my mental state as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important. I think that generally as a society, we aren't acknowledging that in such a way that people feel comfortable to really, I don't know how to put it. Like, I felt also very emotional and very vulnerable, things that I would just go out into the world and do without thinking when I wasn't pregnant. When I was pregnant, it's like a natural protection, but I would feel so sensitive to other people's energy or what was going on, and scared. And I feel now that some of that was his. They're all boys, mine. You have the daughters, I've got the boys. They some of it was theirs and some of it was mine, and some of it was them experiencing. Who's experiencing what when you've got the two joined in like that and you're kind of together, and you can, I feel like I could feel like I was going outwards to him in a very sensitive, opening up to that spirit kind of way, and still practically in the world. And it was really challenging, and I think that in cultures that maybe understand that more and put the mother more at the center and look after the mother with their rituals, their food, their taking the day-to-day practicalities off a woman, really understand why that's necessary. And we tend to sort of, you know, get on with it, almost like you can't even tell people you're pregnant in some working environments in the beginning.
Yeah.
And so it's really helpful to hear that. The second thing I always think when I work with people, I always say, don't worry and feel guilty that, oh no, you felt angry yesterday or you were stressed, they're going to take it on. Because I remember when I first had my son, I was worried and not wanting to protect him from feeling upset about anything. That was after he was born, even before. And it's like it's almost like I was saying he couldn't handle it.
Yeah.
And like you said, when they come in, they're these big beings, and they're new to sort of certain things that we're teaching them, especially once they're born, we're helping them, and at the same time they're like these wise beings as well, and they're kind of coming in and teaching us, and they can handle it.
Yeah.
Then we're just working together, and, you know, their choices and their
Yeah.
experiences.
Well, I feel fortunate. I had the journey tools. You know,
Mm,
I've been a journey practitioner for a number of years before I had my second two.
yes.
And I mean, my first two are amazing, amazing beings and fantastic
Yeah.
girls. I've got the benefit now of having them as adults to be able to go, okay, they turn out all right, you know, like relax. But yeah, certainly with the last two pregnancies, because I had the journey tools, I didn't worry as much, you know, when I did have negative emotions, because I knew that I was able to process them. So I felt that my children already in the womb were learning what
Learning
I
that.
had already learned of how to process emotions, not to, you know, avoid them or hide them from them, just to feel them and allow them to wash through. So I think that in this modern age, I think people tend to think we're giving birth to a body, like a baby is a body, rather than we're giving birth to a soul. And all the focus is on the body. You know, how big is it? Is it growing enough? You know, how big is it? And you know, I mean, all those things are important for the health of the child, but I don't think that anyone's actually really thinking about the soul of the child already from conception is there. And how do we nurture that from conception, not from, you know, after it's born? So that's something I feel really strongly about, that we already start to think. And I was ready. I was lucky. I just, you know, maybe because of who I am, I came across books in my first pregnancy about, you know, a mother's intuition and doing guided visualizations and talking to the baby. And so I was already sort of doing a bit of that even before I found the journey.
Yeah. How did it feel when you were chatting to your baby in the womb? And was it like a real conversation, or how does it feel for you?
You know, I found it hard, like, because sometimes especially when I do journeys, I can have such a clear mental image. I can have such a strong feeling of having a dialogue. And yet when I would do it with the babies, I thought it would be stronger than it was, and it wasn't. But it would be more just getting sort of senses or essences of things, like you were describing about having the different personalities of them in each pregnancy. And I didn't get that until my third one. I don't think I was that self-aware with my first two. I loved being pregnant, the first two, but third and fourth I found really hard pregnancies. But when I got pregnant with the third one, up until then, the first two pregnancies, I loved being pregnant, and I didn't mind people touching my belly, and I felt glowing and really happy and out there. And then with my third one, I was like, I just retreated. I just didn't want anyone to touch me. I'd go to journey events as a trainer, and I literally could not be in the room with all those emotions. It was just like, I don't want to deal with anyone's negative emotion, which was a really surprise to me, because I loved being a facilitator at journey events. And I just felt really introverted, very closed. And it took me a couple of months to go, wow, like this is different to my other pregnancies, and realizing I don't feel like me. This is my child. And so I started to realize that this was a child that was very, well, I had a healing session a bit later in the pregnancy, and the woman said, oh, I'm getting the archetype of magician. She said, this child feels very cloaked, like they've got a cloak around them. She said, they're very mysterious, they don't give away a lot. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what it feels like to me. And it was only twice in the pregnancy that I ever felt her energy come out. Usually when I'd come up and meet people, even if, you know, acquaintances, I literally would feel her energy suck in, like it would retreat into my belly. And it was so distinctive that I remember the two times that I said to the person, oh, she must really like you, because I literally felt her energy come out. And that was such a rare thing. So, and that's exactly what this child's like. You know, she's almost 10 now, and she's a very private, keeps her emotions to herself, doesn't give a lot away, very logical, beautiful child. I mean, I love her to bits, but just really, really different. Whereas with my fourth, the second I got pregnant, I just felt like I had this ball of sunshine in my belly. You know, it was just like this radiating sunshine. I just felt happy and, you know, alive. And that's what she's like. She's just, you know, she was this really sunny, happy, big smile child. So, yeah, I mean, and that comes with experience. I don't know, you know, I mean, some people might notice that straight away, but unless you have a child whose personality is really different to yours, you're not really going to notice the difference.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting. It sort of starts to make you go, wow, they really come in already with their personalities and their traits and it's all there right in the womb.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. I love that.
Yeah.
Really love that. I had an experience when I was pregnant with my second, where I was doing like a drumming journey thing to meet the baby, and I'd done it with my first, and then I did it with my second. And first, it was like being at a funeral, like when you go to the journey and you get memories that come up, and this felt to me that some kind of death thing from the in the womb, that kind of energy, grief, and needed to be cleared for him. He was already in there, but needed to be cleared. So I was like, oh, hold on, I was supposed to be having a bit of a chat. How are you doing? No, no, we're at a funeral. And it came as like a really strong vision. And I cried a lot, like really strong grief. And then it was like having this like real like honoring feeling inside to say goodbye to what I don't know what it was exactly. But then I felt better, thought better do it again and actually see how he's doing. And he just said to me, it was really interesting because I couldn't really see him. I couldn't, it wasn't like I could see what he looked like with X-ray vision or something. It was just a sense that I was in connection with him somehow, and I could feel his presence. And he feels, like you said, like he does now. He's alive. It was the same sense. And he just said, remember, I'm different from my brother. Don't think I'm the same. We are different. I want you to know that we're different. And they're like chalk and cheese, now. Like they get on well. They're brothers. They bicker. They get on well, but they are such different personalities. And I was like, oh, he wanted me to remember that, to see him, to see the child he was, and not think, oh, you should be like your brother. That was important to him for some reason. He wants to be seen for who he is, like.
Yeah.
And it was nice to feel that connection in that way.
I love that the journey gives us that opportunity to connect with them and already get to know them and to clear,
Mm-hmm.
DNA, like ancestral lineage kind of things, because,
Mm-hmm.
when we are a composite already as in ourselves in the womb of our different, our father and mother's lineage. So there's stories and patterns, ways of being emotionally. There's what was I going to say? Traumas that are passed down in the DNA. There's archetypes, so all that's already there in the baby there, and they're often carrying a lot of family history stuff, and that's part of their path here in this lifetime, is to help clear that in our family history. And if you can do it in the womb already, like you did, something obviously cleared, some grief that your son was already carrying, and you were able to clear that. How beautiful that you can start life from even a more fresh space rather than already carrying this baggage. And so that's like, I think that science has already established now that babies don't just come in as this blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
If there's nothing written on them, and life starts from the day they're born. They're already carrying baggage, our family baggage. It's not theirs, but it is part of our life stream to also deal with it. So the sooner we clear it, the better.
Yeah, definitely. So, what kind of challenges did you face in, it's your choices were, like you said, radical to some, and they just felt like that felt important to you. You were essentially honoring what you wanted to do, not
Yes.
like looking out what should be done, or it was just a calling for you to do that. So other people have different callings.
Yes.
And but in that, once you were following, you knew what you wanted to do: water birth, home birth, free birth, nature birth. And once you knew that, and so you were on that path and you knew that was right for you, what kind of challenges would you face in confidence that you needed to overcome?
I think it's funny, the third birth, the third pregnancy, because I decided to have a home birth, and I'd already done had two beautiful, successful births in a birth centre. That was really challenging, and I didn't. It took me a long time in that pregnancy to figure out why. But the whole pregnancy, I felt this overwhelming fear of birth. Like the first two, I just like, I'm going to have natural birth, I'm going to have water birth, and it was just like really easy breezy, like I'm not saying the second one was 12 hours. You know, they were hard physically, but mentally and emotionally, I was just so, yeah, this is what I'm going to do. And I was just really happy about it. And with the third pregnancy, I was just full of fear and doubt and so much fear around giving birth. And it took me a long time. It was like, I reckon like 5 or 6 months in, that I suddenly went, and I kept on saying, why? Why am I feeling all this when I didn't feel it at all with the first two? I felt so confident. And then one day I went, this is not mine. And I literally realized that I felt like I was soaking up the whole consciousness of birth that existed out there. Like I remember going to a local GP. I actually don't have my own doctor because I don't go to the doctor. It's so rare. But so I had to go to the doctor for something, and I went to a local GP and I told him I was having a home birth, and he just went into this rant about how dangerous it was, blah, blah, blah. And I walked out of there and I was so affected. And even though mentally I knew so much about birth, I'd already by then trained to be a doula. So I'd been studying birth, I'd had birth experiences. I knew it was safe. But I felt so rattled, and I just realized that for whatever reason in that third pregnancy, it was like life said, you need to become more humble, that just because it's easy for you to give birth and you've had these amazing birth experiences, I tell people, but there was sort of this, well, if I can do it, anyone can do it. And I hadn't actually experienced the fear that most women and fathers experience, especially if they're the type who have been trained to look at the medical model and listen to doctors and to buy into the fear and the control and the system and the status quo. And I was just like, it was a really, really, really humbling experience to go, oh my goodness, this is the fear that women deal with. I found it excruciating. I just hope I would never have to feel that level of fear again. But I did, like, for most of my third pregnancy. And it really was an eye-opener that what women are dealing with, constantly hearing negative stories from family members or friends or, any person that you meet on the street who sees you're pregnant wants to tell you these horrible stories. And I'd always been able to block that out. And for that pregnancy, I wasn't able to. And so I had to work really, really hard on remembering my education, to continue to do education, to continue to go inward, to speak to the baby, to trust that this was right, to consult with my partner, because he'd never been, like, this is his first child. So I was picking up on a lot of his fear and nervousness. And so we went and did birth workshops together, and, I talked to him a lot about it. And so I really now understand that for some women, it's just going to be like, yep, that's what I want to do, and it comes naturally. And for other women, it's like they're going to have to do a lot to overcome that fear. And it's different for every woman. It's, for me, there wasn't fear of physical pain, and yet for some women, it's the physical pain that terrifies them. For others, it's fear of something happening to the baby, or things going wrong. But yeah, it requires a bit of work, I think. And with the last one, of course, that was the one that I gave birth in nature, completely unassisted. That was more, I felt really confident about that. I didn't have the same level of fear. I was really comfortable in that pregnancy, really confident about my ability to give birth. But the only fear I had was in the last couple of months as I was preparing to fly, because, in Melbourne, it's quite cool. So we were flying to the top of Australia where it was warm, so I could give birth in nature. And I didn't tell many people because I knew that what I was doing was so out there. I just did not want to hear anyone's negative stories. So I told family, and I told my close women's circle friends when they helped a birthing blessing way as well for me. And my only fear was that if something went wrong, I was going to be absolutely crucified in the media. So that was kind of my fear, which was a reasonable fear. I kept on checking in, and I always do. I'm someone who checks in internally a lot. I kept on checking in. It was always like, no, you'll be fine. The baby will be fine. You'll be fine. So deep down, I had this knowing that everything was going to be okay. But there's always that little doubt in the mind that's going, but if something goes wrong? So, I've worked through that. And I think that's the good thing, is that after years of doing journey therapy, I've learnt the difference between the mind that just has its stories and its negativity and its doubt and its worry and everything, and that feeling of something deep, deep inside me that really knows, and I can trust that. And I don't act if I don't feel like that I can feel that. So it's not just an emotional thing. It's not just like I feel happy about something or emotionally good about it. It's like some deep, deep inner knowing that says you can trust this. And so even though the mind's going, don't do it, I've learned that that's something else. That's another program. That's not mine. And that's what I'm interested in changing. That was one of the reasons why I went and gave birth in nature. I put out a prayer that I wanted to change the consciousness of birth. So it wasn't just that I wanted to give my daughter an amazing birth experience or have that experience for myself, because it was like I had a deep and earnest prayer for years that I want to change the whole construct that exists out there about how we give birth. And which doesn't necessarily mean all women going out and giving birth like natives. I'm not saying that, but just this fear and this lack of understanding, this lack of trust in women and themselves, the control. I kind of felt like giving birth like that was like a pebble in that rippling out into consciousness that, I somehow got to break that structure that existed, that I had really viscerally experienced in my third pregnancy, of that fear and control and, tightness and everything around birth.
Yeah, and I think you really have, because I can feel it as you're speaking, and you reached a lot more people than you originally expected to.
I had
Because
no idea.
your video went viral, and a lot of people have seen you giving birth.
Yeah,
And it wasn't your intention, but the universe was like, we're hearing your prayer. Okay, it's a big pebble. The ripples are going.
Absolutely. And that's one
which
thing
I love about that.
I had no idea. I thought I was working out here on the consciousness level. I had no idea. It was a year later that I posted the video, and I thought, a few thousand people would see it. I had no idea. So, and I'm just always, just so grateful that I'm like, thank you, because that was my prayer, and I got
it's reached a lot of people.
But it wasn't like I was trying to make that happen physically.
I think that's what's beautiful about it, that the universe knew. You would never have posted it if you knew that, or you might not have. You might not have done, But I mean, my children watched it and they liked it. They loved it. They wanted to see it again, and they learned something from birth there. They weren't actually present in the end at my third son because of the timing of when it happened, but we were just like, they would have been if it was here, and if not, we talked about it. But so they learned something there.
And I find that telling in itself, like I've had a lot of, parents, particularly mothers, write to me over the years and say, I found your video so helpful for various reasons that are personal to them. But a lot have said, I was preparing my child, for their siblings' birth, and I was looking through, YouTube, and yours is the one that I chose, and my child loved it, and they wanted to watch it over and over again. And I think, no one's hearing themselves say, I chose yours because it's in a setting that makes it less scary. Because if you actually look at the video, it's quite graphic. I'm not like crying tears of joy, like it's hard work.
Real.
An obstetrician saw it, and he's like textbook, birth, and you're seeing parts of me quite close up. So to show a child that, and yet for some reason it's beautiful, and the child understands it and appreciates it, and yet parents are choosing that over showing them a hospital birth. Why? Because on some level they know that that's not going to feel good to the child. Like a young child who's watching it and seeing people with that are strangers, and it's in a clinical setting, and there's harsh lighting and medical instruments and everything, no child's going to look at that and go, oh wow, and want to see it over and over again. Like the parent knows on some level that's going to be disturbing to the child. So I think that speaks volumes, and yet people aren't thinking about it. That why would we show a child a birth in nature over a hospital one? Is because we know which one the child's not going to be freaked out by. So if a child would be freaked out by a hospital birth, then surely we understand why on some physical level that women are, where our bodies are not comfortable with giving birth in those settings. So
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was really pleased to be able to show them some nice videos.
I mean, and having said that, I'm not telling everyone to go off and give birth in nature. You know, the
Yeah, no,
majority of
that's
women that write to me are saying, you know, I was so scared about giving birth, especially if it was their first one. They're like, I'm so scared of giving birth. And then I watched your video and I felt like so empowered, and I felt so reassured. And I went on to give birth in hospital, but I had a really, really positive birth experience. And that just makes me so happy. You know, I'm I know other people are trying to change the, you know, birthing system within the hospitals, and that's going to take a long time, and it's hard work. But you know, I think that we have to think as humanity. You know, like how are we giving birth to future generations is creating the kind of humanity that we have now.
yeah.
It's
I think it's like you've widened what's possible, because no one had done that from our culture in such a public, you know, you it with you, so they've seen something. People that are watching it never thought that was a possibility even. So even if they're choosing a hospital birth, a bit of them has gone, well, that's possible, and it's real. It's not like all fairy lights and just like, oh, it's not hurting, and I'm, you know, and that, there's nothing wrong with some women. It does happen like that for some women, and I've had an experience that was of both pain and not pain during different parts of my own labours, and I think we process things as we're giving birth. But the fact that it was like you were just being you, you weren't doing it for the cameras, you were giving birth privately, even though it was being filmed, you were really in yourself. It was very real, but it opened something up in our mind and our paradigm, and we recognize something we've lost, like you said with the children. On some level, we're recognizing something about birth that's fundamental about women. We're seeing it in your story, and it's touching us. And then we're choosing, like the other point you said about choosing your intuition, what you knew over your mind. And on some level, we're so trained not to trust that. But when you basically knew that was your path, so you're trusting it.
Yes.
And choosing that, and someone else, it might be the hospital for
Oh,
some reason that they don't even know in advance.
yeah.
So they think, oh, but I want a home birth, but I'm choosing to go to the hospital. Or so it's when I get like fired up is when I'm hearing women say, I want this. They know they want that, and they're going, oh, but for this other reason that's fearful, I'm choosing this other path. And it's like, no, choose this path that you really want. Your path. That can be hospital, it can be home, it can be whatever it is telling you in your body that you can't see the future so clearly yet, but your body, your soul can see further than you, can know what is right for you when you get still. And that's what I'd love to see happen as well, that we can face, can do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm fortunate that I've spent quite a bit of time with women who were, you know, very strong advocates for home birth and natural birth and things like that. And, you know, they've had 2 or 3 home births naturally, beautifully. And so they just thought that was how it was going to be. And then with the 4th pregnancy going, I'm going to have to go to the hospital for this one, you know. So like you said, it works both ways. I just think that our whole system is generally just like a funnel for hospital births, and it's not, you know, teaching women that there's other options, or that, you know, like that you said, to trust their inner knowing. But it has to work both ways. It can't just be, you know, if your hospital, like go give birth in a home. If you're a home birther as well, you've got to also listen to your intuition, because you might need medical assistance in one birth. So, and that can change as well. Like you can start off like I did with my pregnancies, thinking it was going to be one way, and then it changed right at the end. So you got to stay open the whole time. You got to keep on checking in and listen to the baby. That, you know, back to earlier in the conversation, it's having that dialogue with the baby, because sometimes the baby will also tell you that something needs to change. You know, something wrong, or, you know, listen. So
when we're not fixed, it's so, you're listening to our intuition. I thought I was going to have a water birth for my 2nd and 3rd, and I didn't. And I had water birth for the first one, so I was planning with the second one, but he kind of had other ideas. And because I was a little bit thinking, oh, I want that because it was so good last time, without going, and it was fine because we had it all ready to go. But in the end, I was in the shower, on land in the shower, and and it was such a great experience that I hadn't chosen. It just happened that way, that afterwards it made me really free, that when people go to me, I want a Wadsworth but I can't have it, or I'm worried about Lambeth, or I'm worried this, I can go, they're both equal, which, you know, plan for them and see what happens. Because you know, with my third, I got in the bath, I got out of the bath, I got on the toilet, all these things that you can't plan that. I couldn't have planned that. I wouldn't have thought, well, I'm going to spend this labour on the toilet, what a great place to be. I would never have thought that. I was thinking fairy lights and my little nest in the corner and how lovely and cozy, and I was like, I want to be on the toilet down. So, you know, and I didn't, once I was there, like, my baby didn't have a story about the toilet not being as nice a place. Kind of, you know, where I was most comfortable at that time. So when we dropped the stories, it's really, it was a lot of fun.
And I'd love to see that, you know, eventually, that we have birthing hospitals, you know, that are separate from the hospitals that we have now, and where they do give women that freedom, you know, much more like birthing centres, where women get to move around and choose the way they want to give birth, and on their own time frame as well. So, but I do think that, you know, it is possible to shift the consciousness of birth. And I know I've seen a lot of shifts even just since, you know, I posted my video, but I've got a friend who, her first 2 children were premature, both of them, one of them quite premature, and she had really, really bad birth experiences with them. And then when she got pregnant with her third, by then she'd met me and she'd heard all about my birth stories. And it was funny, just from hearing my birth stories and talking about birth and how it could be, something in her shifted, you know, and she did a little bit of work. She went off and did some tantra breath work with one of my closest friends, and she never did a journey with me, but still, you know, just by being around me and me talking about birth and educating her about stuff, and there was sort of this assumption that, well, maybe her third was probably going to be premature as well, you know, but her third one was full term, and she had the most amazing birth experience that she said was so healing, because she felt so traumatized from the first 2 experiences. They were really challenging, hard births, and then of course all the worry and fear around having premature babies. But the third one was such a positive experience that she said it completely healed in her all the trauma that she'd had from the first 2. And I think that that's the thing that people, you know, don't understand, that birth affects the mother. It's not just, you know, we've been talking a lot about the baby's experience, but a way a woman births is such an empowering experience for a woman. You know, I had a lot of, you know, negative comments on my video, and I welcome them all, good, bad, whatever. And a lot of people like, oh, you're selfish, you're just doing what you wanted to do, you know, that you didn't care about the baby and everything. And I'm like, it's not selfish to want a really positive birth experience. And I think that I've seen so many women having to deal with the trauma of birth, bad, you know, or horrible birth experiences, and it affects you. It affects your ability to bond with the baby. It affects your health. It affects your mental state, your emotional state, and so then it has this ripple effect of how you are as a mother, how you are as a partner, you know, to your husband or, you know, partner, and it's so important that women have positive birth experiences, because it affects society, it affects our children, you know, and I mean, I had positive birth experiences, and I still ended up with postnatal depression, with, you know, except for the first one. I can't imagine then having to deal with, you know, all the trauma from having really negative birth experiences. And I've witnessed so many women go through that years and years later, still bitter and sad and hurt and angry at, you know, the hospital staff for the way that they've treated them, and they've had to work through that. And like, we shouldn't. Like, that's not fair. Like, motherhood's hard enough, and as a society, we're putting that on women to then have to, you know, process birth trauma as well from these really, really horrible experiences that they've had in, you know, hospital, and being treated, you know, really badly. And so, yeah, and birth for the mother is really, really important. It's not just for the baby.
Yeah, wonderful. What would be your vision for the future of birth and motherhood, if you could, you know, wave a magic wand today and it could be how you'd really like it to be?
Well, like I said, I'd like to see birth, not hospitals. I've got this big thing that I say, because, you know, I deal so much in, and, you know, you and I deal so much in, you know, cellular consciousness and awareness and things, you know, sort of that understanding that we're affected by other people's energies and consciousness. And I have this thing against birth being in hospitals, because hospitals where you go when you're sick or injured or dying. So when you think of hospitals, that's where trauma is. That's where people are stressed. They're trying to save lives. They're trying to fix broken bodies. People are grieving. People are worried, you know, like family members that are there, you know, like are in distress and shock and trauma, trying to deal with these things. People are there with terminal illnesses. And so that's the consciousness of a hospital. And we need that. I'm not saying we don't need that. We need hospitals. But then to go, yeah, a new soul, a new baby's coming in, let's put them in that environment. Let's give birth to them, and like of the absolute worst of, you know, a human experience. And that's what's being imprinted on them psychically. So I'm so against births being in hospitals. I think that we should, at the very least, have separate birthing hospitals where it's just birth. That's it. And that we really think about, you know, who we are as a human species and how we're giving birth to ourselves collectively. So everyone's still very much in the ego of, this is my birth, this is, you know, my child. And we're not thinking about every child is our child, that we're giving birth to humanity, and who, you know, who we are as a species. What kind of species do we want to be? Do we want to be a loving, peaceable, kind, generous, free of fear and control species where we see harmony? Because that's what we all ultimately want, but we don't know how to get there. And so we're seeing now the effects of it with, you know, destroying the earth and crime and violence and ill health and all these sort of things. And I just think it has to start from, you know, the beginning. And so if we created these birth hospitals or birth centres where there's only birth, and where we treat women with kindness and love and respect, where we listen to their inner knowing, where we give them the space to birth in their own way, in their own time, and where it's a collaborative effort from, you know, the personnel are there to support, as good midwives do, and facilitate the woman being empowered and giving birth to this child, and understanding that she has a responsibility. That I think that thing of, you know, women going into hospital being completely stripped of all her responsibility and rights, and the medical staff who are complete strangers and know nothing about the woman and the father, taking away all of that, taking control, then handing this baby back, and then sending them on their way and go, okay, now you're responsible. Like, it's just distorted. It's really very peculiar. Like, if we were aliens watching us giving birth, I'd just go, you just be like, what are they doing? So I think that idea of going, no, we need to trust the mother, and having programs, you know, like these birthing centres would also be educational, you know, leading up about teaching a mother how to communicate with her baby, you know, it's and to understand that we're, you know, creating souls or giving birth to souls, and it's a lot. Like, it's a big vision, but yeah, I think that we'll get there. I think we'd look back at this time just going, we're so barbaric. But I mean, that's true. I mean, I think that's true. We're barbarians in so many ways, you know, and it's not about whether you're vegetarian or not vegetarian, but look at the way we treat animals that we're eating. You know, we treat them in such a barbaric way. You know, I think we can eat meat and treat animals with kindness and love still, you know. So, yeah, and the same with the earth. We can treat the earth with, you know, beauty and respect. And so these are reflections, like what we do to each other, we're also then going to do to animals, and we're also going to do to the earth and things like that. So let's, you know, bring babies in and already be treating them, you know, with reverence, sacredness and kindness and love and respect, and giving them autonomy, giving the mother autonomy, giving the child autonomy. It's a big vision.
See that spill out into the areas of the environment and
Absolutely.
That's the imprint that, you know, if you have a violent birth, your imprint is the world isn't safe, it's violent, these things are being done to me. You're kind of either processing your trauma or acting the way it's all like goes together. There's not that separation like we see it.
No.
Loving start is then the natural love of the child can come out, and
Yeah. And children are naturally like that.
Mm.
But I think that sometimes it's not nurtured, it gets squashed down because,
Mm.
these parents, I mean, they're doing the best they can, but no one's showing them another way, and that's why you and I are doing this work, because we're saying there is another way. But if you're looking to the medical establishment, and you're not necessarily going to get it at the moment. I do think it'll change eventually, but
Mm.
at the moment,
A lot of good people within the system, and the system's still kind of going along in it's like a big machine that people are going, oh, hold on a minute, all these good people trying to sort of tweak the machine, stop the machine, make it nice, but it's still going in that way still. So it's shifted course. There's a lot of good things happening, and
oh,
still there's still that it's not quite on its course yet. It's not quite transformed yet. It's
yeah. Well, my oldest daughter is in her 3rd year of studying to be a midwife, and which was a surprise to me. I never encouraged her or pushed her in that way. So when she said at the end of high school that she wanted to be a midwife, I was like, oh my God. And everyone's like, of course. And I'm like, yeah, but I didn't. She never spoke about it until she announced it. And but yeah, like she says it's amazing, like how much she already knew about birth just from being around me and being present at her sister's birth. But she's a very kind soul and very beautiful and very wise. And she tells me some of the things that she experiences from, other training midwives or midwives in the system. And yeah, they're all doing the best they can, but she's really aware of there's some really beautiful, amazing ones. And then there are some who are just like, their attitude of just like it's just a like a conveyor belt, like it's a machine, it's a system, it's just like they just don't care, they're just like so unsympathetic, she's like, it's really hard to deal with, and she's surprised at how little they actually know, that she says
they're answering a calling in some way where they haven't had the practical experience that she's had.
no.
It's
And look,
another way that your
that's
prayer
the
is getting
training,
help.
that's the training, like I think that yeah, it's a fault of the training system, because I think good teachers would recognize a student that, okay, they might say they want to be a midwife, but it doesn't mean they're suited to be a midwife, like it doesn't mean they're suited for that kind of care, or they need extra training. And it's all on the physical. It's all on the, understanding the physical body. There's that training around nurturing the emotions and the soul of the mother and the child and things like that's just completely absent. So that is something that I really would like to see eventually change, where there's training about to nurses and midwives about you're caring for way more than just the physical body. It's not just get the baby out alive and that's the whole main thing. So but I mean, that's me. Like, I'm just built like that. I'm very much a humanitarian. So for me, it's like, like, I mean, if my child had died in birth, like, I can't even conceive of that. Like, that just seems like the most horrible thing. And yet, I don't think it would have changed anything that I believe or done. Like, I still felt like I was doing things for humanity, not just for myself. And where I think we need to see that shift where people go from me and the ego of my experience, and that's the only thing that's important, to understanding that your experience is important, but it ripples out into everybody. And so you have to see yourself as a we, not just an I.
Yeah. So if you so because we've talked about so many wonderful things, and it's a lot, and I know pregnant women tend to get overwhelmed with all the information. So if there was someone listening that was going, wow, I love this conversation, and and they have fears, they're maybe not feeling so confident, if there was just one thing you would suggest them to start with, or to really remember when they were working towards their feeling confident, what would you suggest?
I think two things. I think education, number one. For me, right from my first pregnancy, I just educated myself so much and about birth. And I think choose very carefully the kind of things you educate yourself with as well. I'm not talking about educating yourself you should have a basic knowledge of the birth process. I think that women are there's so much lack of understanding of how our bodies work. I mean, that goes back to getting your period and, but sort of it's important that we understand how birth works, how our body works. That's really important. So for me, the first thing that that really helped me in my first birth was understanding transition, for instance. That transition, like understanding what happens in the birth process and what transition means, and then, you know, the contractions change and they start pushing the baby out. That transition was the hardest part. That was when I was going to ask for drugs. That was when I was going to want to give up and everything. And just because I had a mental understanding of it, it meant that when I hit transition, and I'd been in labor for like, you know, 22 hours by that stage, I was ready to give up. I was ready to ask drugs. But because I'd learned what that meant and I was educated, at that moment I went, oh, I've just had the thought that I don't want to do this anymore. I'm done. I can't do it. Like, I literally can't do it. I want drugs. I want this, you know, like, I just cut this baby out, do whatever, just, I'm done. And then my mind went, this must be transition. And as soon as I thought that and understood it, I was able to relax and surrender. And that's the point that you reach, is surrender and birth. And that's when it then changes and you start, you know, pushing. And I was always grateful that I understood that, because I think that if you don't have any understanding or level of education around birth and the birth process, you're just going in blind, and it's kind of like luck then, like luck that you get a good midwife, luck that you have a easy birth or a hard birth or whatever. But when you have understanding and education about what happens if you can't move around, if you can't change positions, if you're being monitored, if you've got straps on you, you know, all those things and how they affect the birth process, then you can make conscious choices in you know, it doesn't matter where you give birth, even in the hospital system. So education is my, you know, self-education. And then also do your emotional work, do your inner work. So if you've got fear, see somebody, like figure out where that fear comes from. Is it because of your own birth experience when you were born? Is it because of the stories that your mother and your sisters and your aunts and your family and grandmothers told you? Or is it because of what friends have said or what you've seen on television? Or is it something, you know, like, what is it? Try and heal that. You know, fear's never going to go away completely, but yeah, like if it's so overriding that it just feels like it's completely, you know, overwhelming you and you can't think of anything else, then do your emotional work, and then you'll I think you'll find other benefits out of it too. Like, big on doing the inner emotional work, you know, do as much as you can. And I think that there's something in pregnancy. I think that we're very open, like we're very porous. And I think that that's actually a really beautiful time that the body and the psyche of a woman is meant to be doing emotional clearing work. I think that it's much easier to access family trauma or your own personal trauma at that time. I think that there's a reason we're more emotional, and it's not a bad reason. So, yeah, just take advantage of being so open.
Beautiful, really beautiful. Yeah, and I think we've covered all my questions. I think it's a really beautiful conversation. If you have anything else to add, otherwise I think it's a lot of beautiful, really beautiful visions and pictures and support. Just listening to you, for anyone listening, is, so I'm really thankful that you came to chat today so openly about your own experiences, and I hope that ripple continues to spread out in the world with your.
Thank you. I think us women are amazing. I think we just do these amazing things, and yeah, our children are very lucky as well, I think, you know. And they deserve it. I think we all deserve it. I think we all deserve to have mothers who give this kind of thought and attention and inner guidance to ourselves and to our children. And I know my children are grateful for it. So, yeah, our children deserve it. We deserve it. And we deserve it from other women as well. Like, I think that's another important thing. You know, seek out other women who've had, you know, and I'm not saying just ones that have had perfect birth experiences, but, you know, women who, you know, like are strong and have done the inner work, who are really positive, encouraging, who've overcome challenges, whatever they might be. We need each other as well.
Yeah, beautiful. So thank you so much for coming on today. And yeah, thank you. So
All right.
bye.
Bye.